All right. First rule of the channel. We not talk about this channel. Second rule of the channel. This is not legal advice. So this is going to be a crazy breakout video. In general, last night in my high school league, I did stash Andre Iosivas in the 15th round. I did talk to my co-manager and I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure with all the Jamar Chase shenanigans, we should clear the roster spot and make sure we can hold on to this guy. We want to see what happens. Not going to say that he's got like Puka. He's probably more like Nico, but we can break that down a little bit more. The more I was looking at this today after some of the stuff with the Brandon Aiyuk situation, it may be about time to talk about like who I think is going to be that crazy breakout. And that was what I was getting into with this today. So with Iosivas, 6th round draft pick last year out of Princeton, 4.43 guy. He's like 6'3", 210, all that good stuff. He was being used last year in the red zone. So if you've been around the channel for a while, I went back and looked this up. Like we were tracking this guy way back in like week 8 last year. So again, like this is not a surprise. Like I went back and I looked it up and I see that like because of the Jamar Chase situation, he has not been moving up in rankings. So he flopped with Jermaine Burton on ESPN. He's 229, Jermaine Burton down to 294, which should be where they're going at. And then over here on Fantasy Pros, you're looking at like Burton's going like 203. And then Iosivas is going 229, which is not where these guys should be going. Like right now, Iosivas should be somewhere between like 160 and 180 as number 3 attached to Joe Burrow, right? And then Iosivas on Yahoo, and this is what really blew my mind when I was looking at him right before the draft or trying to find him so I could tag him during the draft. I was thinking he's going to be like 180, 160, something along those lines. He was 233. I had to actually go search for him in the draft to go or get him late in the draft. So again, he's going there, and I think Burton's going 242. So again, they're way too low relative to where you could be getting them. And I can go and I can show you this one with your good friend Tyler Boyd. When we're looking at Tyler Boyd, probably not, the apples to apples comparison would be like 2021, where you had T and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow all healthy. That's like 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. And again, with Iosivas, you're probably going to get more of an ability to run on the outside than you had with Boyd because of that size speed combination. And this was a guy that the Bengals were already rolling out in the red zone package. So again, like could theoretically end up being the red zone guy. And that's even with Jamar Chase, playing this year. So we're going to break down this a little bit more because we have to talk about like the theoretical upside of Iosivas if Jamar Chase plays. And that's probably about like 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. So you give you like a top 36 wide receiver. That's outside of where he's going in your draft. So again, deeper leagues, absolutely. Shallower leagues, yeah, still probably as long as Jamar Chase is not signed. So that's what I'd be looking at in general. And then with an upside, now we can start talking like that ceiling, what we could be looking at with the Iosivas. And that's where it gets like really interesting the more I started breaking them down today, based off all this. So with Adam Schefter, he came out like Brandon Aiyuk, 3 or 4 years, $120 million contract. Not Jamar Chase. Justin Jefferson did 4 years, 140. So that's where like you can get an idea that Jamar Chase is probably pushing towards that Justin Jefferson type of range. And I think I saw today like Aiyuk got $72 million guaranteed. So again, probably like $100 million guaranteed is what like Jamar Chase is looking at. I don't understand with these guys. In this case, with this tweet that I found interesting, like with Adam Schefter, he said like this Brandon Aiyuk deal has been sitting on the table since August 12th, and he just decided to sign it today. So again, your guess is as good as mine. What's going on with these guys' head? So story time. In 2018 with Le'Veon Bell, like he held out, and everybody's like, yeah, he's going to play this year. And then just from a fantasy perspective, like you kind of have to, predict the future. And if it costs you relatively nothing to be wrong, like why wouldn't you just go staff James Conner? That's what I did in this league. Like Le'Veon Bell went 101, and I just went and like sniped the handcuff at like the 12th round of the draft, and I got running back 7. So again, what would it cost me if I was wrong and Le'Veon Bell finished the season? He was like the 101 and James Conner was like worthless. Nothing. Like no one's ever said like they lost the league because they missed out on like a 12th round draft pick. So again, guessing where these guys should be going. And right now, Iosivas should probably be like a 10th round draft pick, in all honesty, where we're going to go at. So the other thing is like with Jermaine Burton, we'll talk a little bit more about Jermaine Burton, but the wide receiver 3 battle or /2 battle for the Bengals, it was over after week 1. So Joe Burrow played 5 for 7, 51 yards, 1 touchdown. Jermaine Burton, 3 for 82 and a touchdown, but Iosivas played 1 for 23, and there's T. Higgins, 2 for 19. Now, week 2, no Joe Burrow. no Iosivas, no T. Higgins, and then our good buddy Jermaine Burton 1 for 19. He plays in that game. And then the final preseason game, no Joe Burrow, no Iosivas, no T. Higgins, Jermaine Burton 4 for 56, and a touchdown to go along with it. Now, I still think Jermaine Burton is special. He's probably going to be like really special next year when we try to like break down what's going to go on with the Bengals and guess like where Burton and Iosivas are going to go. And I'm going to guess like Iosivas is, at this point, I'm going to guess that Iosivas is probably going to be a top 50 player, and Burton's probably going to be like a top 7th round draft pick, something along those lines when we break these guys down now. Because T. Higgins is probably going to move on. And then if Jamar Chase signs his contract at a certain point within the next like foreseeable future, like we could project like wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 at that point with these guys. All right. Talked about that. So I already talked about Brandon Aiyuk. He got his deal done. It's been sitting on the table since like August 12th. This is some of the interesting stuff with like the collective bargaining agreement. I believe Brandon Aiyuk has been holding out. CD Lamb held out, and then Jamar Chase has been holding in. So again, the fines for Jamar Chase does not accrue fines because he's showing up the facility. He's doing some stuff sometimes when he feels like it. And then like Brandon Aiyuk didn't show up, CD Lamb didn't show up. They're supposed to be getting fined. Trent Williams, the offensive tackle for the 49ers, I think I saw that he's getting fined like $50,000 a day. So again, for Jamar Chase, and this goes back to good old Adam Schefter. I was listening to him on the Pat Mack show when he was breaking this down. This is what made me start thinking about all this stuff. So CD Lamb, he lands on the commissioner's exempt list, so he doesn't count against the 53-man roster. That means the Cowboys can just decide to ramp him up slowly but surely. No guarantee that he is or is not going to play week 1 because he's on that 53-man exemption. And the Cowboys can just go like, well, when we think that he's ready to play physically, we can roll him out there. Why that matters is I imagine that Brandon Aiyuk could get the same treatment. And that means like Jamar Chase could end up getting the same treatment where there's no guarantee they're going to start the season, even if they sign their deals relative, or Jamar Chase in this case signs his deal relatively soon and all this stuff. So with Adam Schefter and Jamar Chase, he was talking about the fact that like the Bengals own his rights this year. And then for the next, 4 years in general. So this goes back to that collective bargaining agreement stuff. Like if he doesn't play, the contract may stay valid this year, which means he still has to play under this year's terms next year. And then if he does theoretically play this year, because this would be like the 4th year of his deal, they have the 5th year option because he's a 1st round draft pick. Plus you're looking at 2 years of franchise tag. And this is going off a guy that like basically sat out his like 2nd year or 3rd year at LSU, because he was going to be like one of the top picks in the draft. So again, he's already sat out a year, waiting on money. So like that was one of the other things I was like, these are all really valid things to be looking at with like Jamar Chase. He's only making $1 million this year for game checks. So like every game that he sits out is $70,000, and he's weighing that against theoretically $100 million guaranteed. That like he's doesn't know how he can win the Mexican standoff with the Cincinnati Bengals if he shows up and plays. So going back to like Le'Veon Bell, everybody out there was like, oh yeah, he's going to play in 2018. Well, he didn't play. So like anybody out there is like, well, like Jamar Chase is going to play. Like not only do you not know that he's going to play, because we've seen guys sit out the entire year. We can't even say like if he does play, like how healthy he's going to be and how long he's going to be out, theoretically, even going on like the exempt list. This is all stuff you got to be looking at. So this is where we can start talking about like Andre Iosivas, because it's going to cost me relatively nothing to find out. And going back to like your Puka or your Nico Collins, there's a vacated opportunity for number 1 attached to what projects to be a good to great offense. Now, we could talk about whether or not it's going to end up being T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins is kind of limited from a like real world football capacity, probably like a very good number 2 in an offense. I am not saying that Iosivas is like a number 1. That's not what this conversation is about. This is fantasy football. I was doing a lot of stuff on Iosivas today. I'm not going to tell you anything about that. And I have written down in my notes, if you're interested, it doesn't matter what the quote unquote experts say or the tape or your best friend. There's a vacated opportunity from a fantasy football perspective, and it just becomes an issue of cost. So if you want to go up and you want to spend on T. Higgins, you're more than welcome to. If you want to go out and you want to spend on Jermaine Burton, you're more than welcome to. If you want to take your flyer, and I can bring up Mike Gesicki, you want to take your flyer on Mike Gesicki, that's also fine. I'm going to say like the guy to go after is Iosivas at this point, based off what we saw last year, based off his measurables, and based off the situation in general. Like, he didn't play week 2, week 3, and Jermaine Burton is. So if you're wondering about Jermaine Burton, all indications have been going on is he's having a hard time integrating into the offense. He's likely more of an outside only player and not a slot player. The slot means a lot from a fantasy football perspective because that means that, like, if a guy plays a slot, he's going to give you a 40-degree day. That's just the long and short of it. Once he transitions to the outside, we can look at like a CeeDee Lamb. That's when you're going to get your spike weeks. So a guy that can play the slot and he can go outside is going to be that league winner. And that's what we're generally could be thinking of a ceiling when it comes to Iosivas, especially if Jamar Chase is gone. So again, maybe we can get something along the lines of like 1,000 to 800 yards and like, 5 to 7 touchdowns for Iosivas. That's what Tyler Boyd was doing when he was there with Cincinnati and those other guys. Maybe we can get that guy. He's already going outside of that range with Iosivas. Now we can start talking about, like, can he jump into that like unicorn type of range, like Jamar Chase being out for the season? That's where it just becomes an interesting conversation when it comes to like capital that I would put into this guy. 13th, 12th round draft, but it's too easy. Like, it's just, maybe I get the right guy, I'm going to know week one. And that's one of the things with fantasy football, trying to predict who's going to be the number one guy on waiver wire week one. And if it's Iosivas and you have the opportunity to stash him, and I've already stashed him in my high school league, I got a clear space in my main money league to be able to stash him at this point because, like, the story's there. That's the long short of it. I don't have to sell you on it. That's what it's going to be. You're looking at a guy that's already going to be in that flex wide receiver 3 range with theoretically even like a wide receiver 2 ceiling if Jamar Chase plays. And then we can start like guessing on what the ceiling is going to be if Jamar Chase doesn't play. And we have no idea on that one. So again, if you've already drafted, go out and stash him. That's what I've already done. If you're going to draft in the near future and Jamar Chase has not signed his deal, yeah, I don't know what to tell you at that point when it comes down to that, because we could tell the story about this, how this guy's going to win leagues. So the other thing is to look at the tight end room, and I'll just say, like, Mike Gesicki, even though he's a seam ripper, he's like a 4 or 5 tight end, all that stuff. Big wide receiver on steroids. That's what Mike Gesicki is. The other thing is, from a contract perspective, 1 year, $2.5 million contract. And this was where, like, when you start breaking some of this down, it gets really crazy. The Bengals kept 5 tight ends on their roster, their 53-man roster. So you're looking at Gesicki, seam ripper, Drew Sample, the blocker, Tanner Hudson last year. Like, when he played, he was getting targets. So again, this is something we're tracking in after waivers. They were splitting all their tight ends up. And then Eric Hall, he's a 4th round draft pick. He's athletically, good. Injured last year at Iowa, transfer from Michigan. And then Tanner McLaughlin, he's like 6th round draft pick from like Arizona. He was good enough. What I read is the Bengals were not going to risk him signing him to the practice squad. They had to protect him on the 53. So again, they're kind of deep at tight end right now. And part of the reason why I bring this up is because if we can expect that the Bengals are either not going to have a tight end that's going to actually be that guy, or they're going to be in a lot of 2 tight end sets in the first place because they're rather deep at tight end. I can also see that occurring. And then it just becomes an issue of, from what we've seen, Iosivas has already won the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 2/3 job, depending on if Chase is signs his contract. So in this case, like that idea that Jermaine Burton's going to stay on the field and Iosivas is going to be on the sideline, that ship already looks like it sailed after week 1. And then if Jermaine Burton does play, it does look like he's going to probably be in some type of timeshare with Trenton Irwin. Trenton Irwin's going to do the stuff that they trust, and Jermaine Burton's going to take the top off the defense. And I would probably say at that point, if you are interested in your Jermaine Burton shares from a redraft perspective, you should probably be looking at Rashee Rice at this point. And 2023 with Rashee Rice, where you're looking at him ramping up until about like week 10, and then he's going to hit your fantasy lineup. The difference between Rashee Rice, again, guy works the slot, design passing plays to him. Burton's probably never going to be that guy who gets design passing plays to him working on the outside. He's going to be the clear out guy that he's going to get that boom bust wide receiver 3 range in a way that Rashee Rice doesn't. So if we get it all together, red zone work, that possession work out of the slot, and we get outside, higher productivity, lower probability throws, like we can tell that story with Iosivas in the way we can't. Now, from an after waivers perspective, the show that I do in the offseason, this is the same type of stuff that we've been tracking on when we looked at the breakout for Trey McBride. So like just looking at the snap share and the opportunity going up, hey, go out and get your Trey McBride before he does like his week 8 breakout. So the same thing with Iosivas when we're looking at these guys, like tracking the target share. Hey, 32% snaps week 5, that's interesting. And then by week 8, it's like, who's this guy getting red zone opportunities? That's just what I've been looking at. So I've been paying attention to him for a while, and then I just put a little bit more effort out because there's that theoretical breakout or the theoretical vacated opportunity, because we can't necessarily know that for a fact that Jamar Chase will not sit out the season. and how many games he's going to actually mix. Again, I talked about this before. I think he has to play 9 games or something like that in order to accrue the season to burn the contract year. So again, at that point, it just becomes like, is a 13th round draft pick worth it to theoretically be able to have a puncher's chance as number 1 attached to Joe Burrow? And again, if you like T. Higgins, and I think he's limited as that number 2 in that offense, that he's probably going to stay in that like high end wide receiver 3, like solid wide receiver 2 range if he does take over the offense. So even at that point, like that dart throw with Iosivas is probably good enough. That's generally what I'd be tracking at. So again, I don't know if I would necessarily go as far as to say like, hey, like the same thing as Puka last year, being able to tell that story. But at this point, like, August 29th, unless like Jamar Chase actually gets signed in the relatively in the near future. And again, with what Schefter said, where like, $70,000, weighing that a game check versus like $100 million guarantee, like I would be leaning towards like the chance that Jamar Chase is gonna sit the season out this year. So anyway, that's what I got, and hopefully this does not age like milk.